Thanks to our sponsors Renault. The Renault Capture, the versatile compact family SUV.
You're still the one I run to, the one that I belong to. You're still the one I want for life.
A grain of rice, a grain of rice is going to tip the scale. Just remember that, lad.
There's a small bit of a needle there.
Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen between them, and now they're really roaring. And I can tell you, that there won't be a cow milk in County Clare for at least a week.
Hello everyone, you're very welcome to the Irish Examiner Gaelic Football Show in association with Renault. My name is Paul Rouse and I'm joined by the former Armagh footballer Oisín McConville, by the former Kerry footballer Bryan Sheehan and by Tony Leen, the sports editor of the Irish Examiner. It feels that the fog is now clearing around the football championship and we finally get down to the business end of things. The draw has taken place for the quarterfinals. Kerry against Mayo, Dublin against Cork, Galway against Armagh, Derry against Clare. And I have to say I'm disappointed because I was hoping it was going to be Kerry Armagh to listen to Oisín explain why Armagh had no chance and the Kerry lads explaining why they'd be lucky to get a team up to play the quarter-final. But either ways, it is now open and it's now on. Bryan, you must be excited with that draw.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's exactly what Kerry needed, to be honest with you. I don't see what would have been the benefit of Kerry drawing Clare. And I just no disrespect to Clare because look, Kerry are on a different level to where Clare are, and they just need it because look, Dublin will be Cork, and you can't go into an All-Ireland semi-final uncontested. And that we spoke about previously, the last competitive game that Kerry had was sometime in the league. So I think it's great now that they're meeting a Mayo team, and especially Mayo from the point of view of they're coming through the back door. They've won hard games and they've come from behind in the last two games they've played and had to eke out a result. And I think it's a perfect one. I think even if they had played Armagh, I would have been after seeing Armagh yesterday. I would have been very, very cautious or concerned about facing Armagh. I just think it's in the right game for them. I think it's if they met Armagh, Kerry being idle for so long, Armagh coming the route they've come, the teams they've beaten, I think it would have been a right hard test for Kerry, below inside in Killarney. But I just think the Mayo game is the perfect setup for them to for the quarterfinal, to be honest with you. So look, I do expect Kerry to beat Mayo, but I think it's the best game, the best draw they could have gotten on the day, to be honest.
Did you think Mayo were poor against Kildare?
Yeah, I thought they were very poor. And I think if there was any other team, if it was Armagh, if it was Galway, Kerry, Dublin, I think Mayo would have been out. I mean, they would have been beaten. Their first half performance, I thought, was poor. I thought, to be honest, I can't say anything else. It was poor. And I think that's, someone was on to me during the week about picking, they've got last man standing accumulators, and they were debating whether to pick Mayo or Roscommon. And I said to them, I just think that Mayo were too unpredictable. I said that's the kind of performances in Mayo. They could fall flat like they did in the first half. But again, look, who am I or where am I going doubting Mayo? Because every time that their backs are to the wall, they seem to pull something off. But I just think that, do they have what it takes to go and win the All-Ireland? I just still think they don't. For me, and I think, Oisín, watching the Sunday game last night, you made a very good point about Clare over the last couple of years of how much they've learned and how much that they've learned from playing Division 2 football. They've learned from their mistakes. They've learned how to cope. You mentioned how they've set up now at the moment. And I think from Mayo, they just don't seem to be learning. And that's the big thing I get from watching Mayo. They're still making the same mistakes 4 or 5 years in a row. Their decision making on the ball, they're in the final third, some of the attempts they have for score. I think there was someone said yesterday that half of the scores or half of the kicks that Mayo had yesterday on the last day were either wide or drop short. Like, that's an awful statistic to have in an All-Ireland quarter-final, heading into an All-Ireland quarter-final. And I just think that's where Mayo are short, and it's the same fallings over and over again. And they're still relying on their backs to kick most of their scores. You take Lee Keegan out of it, you take Paddy Durkin out of it, you take Owen McLaughlin out of it. the Mayo forwards are not producing enough scores, and I just think there's the same mistakes over and over again. They're going to find Mayo to be caught out.
Is that how you see it, Oisín?
I just think every time I look at Mayo, I think the first thing about them is that I believe that they are trying to have more control in the game. And I think when you're standing on the lane watching them, or you're standing on the lane watching any team, you want to have control over the game, and you want to say to yourself, right, look, if X, Y, and Z happens, this is what we're going to do. This is going to be our reaction to it. But like, Mayo should really have given up the ghost on that 4, 5, 6, 10 years ago, because Mayo are at the best, and I do get this, that you shouldn't just be accepting of the fact that when a game is chaos and it's helter skelter, that Mayo are like when that game started opening up, and they made Kildare chase them, and they started to hunt them down a little bit, and they started to be a little bit more direct. Like, was anybody in any doubt who was going to win the game? Like in the last 5 or 6 minutes. So I do think that Mayo trying to control games, that has to go out the window, and it has to be. I think that when Mayo play Kerry, the more they can ruffle Kerry's feathers, the earlier they can do that. If they try and set up similar to the way they set up against Kildare, Kerry will be home and hosed after 35 minutes, and regardless of how much Mayo do in the last 20 minutes, or how upward the crowd get, and how much the crowd get behind them, and how Mayo change things, and how the subs give them more energy, it won't matter, because they'll be dead and buried. So I think Mayo need to learn a lesson similar actually to the lesson that Armagh learned when they went to Ballybuffet and tried to control the game, tried to pass over the kickouts. Mayo can't do that. They just can't. And, they need to make it a dogfight in the middle of the field, and they need to be more aggressive. I do think, though, that having watched Mayo in the 2 games over the last couple of weeks, they're finding little things as they go along. For example, the changes, at the weekend, the lads that come off the bench, you may find that some of those will have to start now. And I do understand how much you need impact off the bench, but I do think that some of those guys, even Flynn, Loftus, I think those are the sort of guys who probably need to start the game. Even if they only give you 35, 40 minutes, I think it's so important for Mayo to stay in the game. And I think, as I say, they've started to find something in the last 2 weeks, and
so I agree with that. Okay, I'm sorry.
Improvements have been small.
I agree with that, but I was at the league final between Kerry and Mayo in Croke Park, and it was obliteration.
Yeah,
and I can't see the change that can take place with Mayo in that short space of time. I don't see the improvement.
Yeah,
and it's not the Mayo of old, because their baseline is lower, their high point is lower.
Yeah, and they don't have the same ammunition up front. But yes. I'm just trying to give the people outside of Kerry a little bit of a reason to watch this game, a little bit of a reason to think that Mayo can at least, as I say, like, what would be wrong with Mayo going into this game and saying, listen, lads, just
mayhem. Go for mayhem.
Mayhem all
absolutely.
Over the place. Mayhem
it's the
all
battle
over
of the Somme from the first minute on.
And make it more physical than they've ever made it.
Yes.
And they have the ability to do that. There's a couple of things Mayo have the ability to do. And you don't think, like, Kerry coming into this game with the layoff that they've had, that can't happen. I genuinely think it can happen. And I don't think it's going to be the obliteration that it was. But if Mayo start with the intent of, listen, we're going to contain them for 35 minutes and then we're going to go at them, it's just not going to happen. Mayo cannot contain teams. They just can't. If Mayo are going to win this game, it's going to be 222 to 121, something like that. That's the way they're going to win the game. They're going to have to be accepting of the fact that, Kerry are just awesome up front, and they're going to get 120 at least on a bad day. and they have to be
If
acceptable.
Mayo
of that.
score 222 against Kerry, I'm going to come up and paint your house for you. It is neither that Kerry backline will not concede 222, and Mayo will not. That forward line cannot score 222.
And what makes you say that Kerry defense can't concede 222?
Because
Is it
the
because of
evidence the
Mayo?
league-
Is it because of Mayo, or how good did Kerry defense?
No,
is?
again, we don't know how good the Kerry defense is in the long run. I mean, to that forward line.
Yeah, no. I accept that point, but remember, you're not just talking about that forward line. I mean, McLaughlin has had 5 goal chances in 2 games. If he converts 2 of them, there's your 2 goals. Killian O'Connor kicks 6 or 7 points from frees. They have to chip in. They have to chip in all over the field. But I just think that Mayo haven't got that little small bit of momentum, small bit of belief. Come back down that bus. They're bound to have felt good about themselves. They're bound to have found a little bit of something. And do you know what? It doesn't take a big pile to jog the memory and say, you know what? Like, do you think will Mayo go into this game against Kerry with any hang-ups? Absolutely not. And they'll have a little bit of stuff in their head to say, maybe we owe these boys one. I know what you're going to say to me. They don't have the stuff to do that anymore, and I do get that. But
Bottom line.
But I do think it's still quite a dangerous game.
Tony, Kerry have to be confident about this. Perfect draw for Kerry.
I think Oisín is right in one respect. I think that the Mayo game plan, certainly insofar as it relates to the opposition, has to be all about taking advantage of how undercooked Kerry will be. How much Kerry will be. It is a dangerous game, but I'm with Bryan in the sense of I would absolutely have preferred Mayo or Armagh than Clare. Obviously, they couldn't get Cork. From a Kerry point of view, they're in a dangerous place. I've said this in a previous podcast. This isn't playing the old soldier. I do think it's the most dangerous game of the year. In actual fact, given how often Kerry are Munster champions and given that they haven't changed the structures over the years, I have always argued that the All-Ireland quarter-final is the most dangerous game of the year always for Kerry. Because it will depend, A, on what has happened to them in Munster. And we know what happened to them in Munster. They won their 2 games by a combined 35 points. The last game that they played of any note, Bryan, I was just looking it up there, was March the 12th in Tralee, 112 to 14 points against Mayo in the Spills of Rain. That was the last time that whatever Kerry, Jack and Paddy Talley have done to reshape themselves defensively has been truly tested. That is a hell of a long time ago. They got no challenge game in the meantime. They were here in Cork for the weekend in Fota. I'm presuming that they were working on structure. Obviously, at that stage, you don't know. But from tonight, they have 13 days or 12, depending on when the game is, to actually set up for Mayo. And I genuinely think Mayo will, as Tomas O'Shea famously, I think Paddy said first, and then Tomas said it afterwards, was throw the hammer after the hatchet at Kerry. That's what Mayo will do, whether they have the legs to do that at this stage, but they certainly won't fear Kerry, Paul. And you know that. I mean, Mayo have beaten Kerry often enough. That game, in actual fact, I remember on the night someone telling me, that game in Tralee in March was the first time since 2009 that Kerry had actually beaten Mayo at home in the league. So if Mayo have no fear about coming down to Tralee or Killarney, they're certainly not going to have any fear playing in what is, by a mile, their favourite ground, well ahead of Castlebar.
Oisín.
Paul, what did you think of Roscommon at the weekend?
I thought Roscommon were classic Roscommon for 20 minutes in the second half where they played good football. I thought they were terrible in the first half. They opened the door.
Who'd you rather have had at the weekend, Roscommon or Mayo? Who would you rather be in the what camp would you rather be in?
Oh, I'd rather be in the Mayo camp.
Right. Well, Roscommon and Kerry, I think that was the only challenge match Kerry have played. From Roscommon and Kerry. And Roscommon were very, very, very competitive against
With
Kerry. With Kerry. Okay?
So
like this, I'm sorry, lads. I still don't get this. Even Pat said last night, Kerry's way ahead of everybody else. Like, on what basis? Like, where's the evidence for that? Until we see a little bit of evidence, lads. And look, we could be having a conversation on the 25th of July and saying, listen, you know, what an unbelievable Kerry team. But I'm sorry, lads, we can't have that conversation until that actually happens. And for that to happen, Kerry's going to have to beat Mayo, and then they're going to have to beat Dublin.
Correct.
I agree 100% because I suppose, look, what we're talking about here was based on the performance of Mayo yesterday, of how poor they were, and going back even how poor they were previously in a lot of patches of games. They were very, very poor. But make no mistake about it, Mayo have nothing to lose going to Killarney. I think if anything, it was probably even the game they were probably looking for, because like this will be a massive boost to Mayo if they're going to come in and have a contention and winning the All-Ireland, to go down to Killarney and to beat Kerry in the backyard, and they'll really, really fancy it. But I think they've nothing to lose, and I think if anything, they're going, as Oisín said, and that's exactly the way I would be if I was to set up a team, is go down and ruffle the feathers. Let's get stuck in. If we have to cause a scrap here in the first 5-10 minutes, and let's put the game, like play the game at a manic level. Let's cause chaos down there. That's exactly what Mayo will do, because Kerry at the moment have not played a game of that intensity all year. So that's exactly what Mayo do. And I don't care what you say. If you're sitting idle for 4 weeks and you can play all the internal challenge games, you can play the AVB games, it's not until you come to the white heat of collar battle that you find out whether you're cooked or not. And that's the problem, the danger Kerry have at the moment, is that they're not battle hardened. They don't know where they're at. And it comes down to things like when you're inside in heat of battle, decision making. We're not used to making these decisions. All of a sudden, the pressure's on you. You find momentum isn't going with you. Jesus, Mayo are coming at you 100 miles an hour and you can't understand what's going on. You felt fine in training. And it's the same thing if you're coming back from injury. If you're out of the game for 4, 5, 6 weeks with an injury, coming back into a game of that intensity, you're going to struggle. You're going to find it hard. You'll be puffing for wind. You're looking around just saying, Jesus, I might have to lose my fitness. Doubts come in and you start questioning yourself. And that's what Kerry are going to face the next day. And not for 1 second am I saying here that this is going to be a walk in the park for Kerry. Absolutely not. This game will be a very competitive game. I think it's the game that Kerry needed if they are to go on and win the All-Ireland. I think it's a game that they need if they are to go on to an All-Ireland semi-final and face Dublin. With all due respect, I think Dublin will beat Cork. And I think there's no way that you're going to go into an All-Ireland semi-final if you hadn't have a good competitive game. So from that point of view, I'm saying, yes, it's a good game for Kerry that they got Mayo. I'm not for 1 second saying that Kerry are going to just turn up and beat Mayo on the day. There's a massive job ahead of Kerry. Because, as I said, even if you look back on all yesterday's results, all the provincial finalists that lost as well yesterday, or lost over the weekend.
So what I'd say in response to that,
big game.
So if that's fine, Brian, but what I'd say in response to that is that if this game was in Tralee under lights on a Saturday night, I'd give Mayo more of a chance. It's going to be in Croke Park on a big, fast, wide open pitch. I cannot see. And if any of the three of you can tell me who's going to mark David Clifford or how that's going to work, I'd love to hear it. Who are you putting on him straight on? And I know you're going to give him a help out, but who are you putting on David Clifford?
Well, Oisín Mullen has to mark him. Simple as that.
And who's giving him help because he won't hold him on his own?
Well, see, that's the thing. So we put in somebody in there, try and help him, waste the time. Mayo haven't practiced that. They don't know how to play it. And that's been their Achilles heel, when they've tried to do that, they can try and get bodies back. I mean, like the obvious one to get back in there is Rian, because he's the most athletic, and like he was very quiet at the weekend. Has been quiet actually the last 2 games. Yeah. So he's the boy he's the man that can get back in there and help, and so can Aidan O'Shea. And you know what? Release your other cornerback. Release Hessian, because he can get forward and get forward at pace, and that opens it up for McLaughlin. And again, Paddy Durkin has been really quiet. Just completely off it as far as just completely off it as far as even his decision making.
Sorry? He is Brian. He's coming back from injury, and he just looks out of form.
This
He's
is my point. It
2
just
weeks,
means,
like, you know.
yeah, fellas, when you're out of the game for that long, it takes you a while to get up to the pitch of it. And that's what I'm saying with Mayo, with the momentum, coming into the game the next day, and Kerry sitting idle for 4 weeks. Like, a lot of those Kerry players would be like Paddy Durcan trying to find their feet again. Obviously, different story coming from an injury where you probably aren't able to train, you know what I mean? But that's the scenario I'm on about. It's you're coming from a place where you just don't quite know where you're at. And then that's going to be the biggest problem Jack is going to have with Kerry, is trying to get them to the pitch of where they need to be at.
Can I ask a question of the three of you? I have suggested in the past, I couldn't understand why some teams actually just weren't double teaming David Clifford, like that he is that central and he is that good. But the fact, I think that Tony Brosnan has stepped up, obviously you've Sean O'Shea, you've Paul Ganey has got his form back, you've Killian Spillane has gone. Are Kerry as reliant on David Clifford as they might have been 12 months ago? Or to reframe the question, if David Clifford is held to 2 points, one from a free, will Kerry still have enough firepower to win a quarter final?
So I just want to say something on that first. I think it will be very interesting to see all of those forwards turned and chasing back towards their own goal, because that looks to me like an unbalanced forward line with a lot of attackers and very few workers. That's the only point I'd make on that. Brian?
Yeah, look, that's fine, but I think the big thing here is if you have the ball or don't have the ball. It's fine to say that all these Mayo forward backs will be attacking up the field. It all depends on who has the ball, and I think we're on about David Clifford here. We're on about stifling David Clifford. For me, the way you stifle David Clifford is you start winning possession in the midfield. You don't give Kerry the ball, and all of a sudden, if Kerry don't have the ball, David Clifford's not going to hurt you. So the big thing for me is it's who's supplying the bullets to David Clifford, who has possession of the ball, and that's, I think, where Mayo have to be so frantic, is that they make the game so scattered and think that they don't give Kerry time to settle. Like, if you start dropping players back, Kerry will, they're good footballers. They'll leak out a spare man. Paddy Clifford will find himself coming deep, or he'll find himself getting on ball. Himself and David have a fantastic understanding. Sean O'Shea has a great understanding with David as well. So for me, I think there's only so much you can do from the point of view of trying to stifle David. But the big thing for me is it all depends on who has the ball. If you have the ball and Kerry have the ball, those Mayo backs are going to be on the back foot. But again, if Mayo have possession and they're winning the midfield battle and they're winning the breaking ball and they're turning over ball up front, then by all means, your Mayo backs will be taking up the field, and it's going to be a hard day for that Kerry half forward line. So for me, the big thing is possession.
Jack O'Connor said as much, that he picked Killian Spillane over Adrian Spillane for the Munster final against Limerick because he knew the volume of ball that Kerry were actually going to have. I disagree with you, Paul. I actually think that when they actually pick what has been their starting six up front, I actually think it's a very balanced Kerry attack. All those names I mentioned, Killian, Tony Brosnan, David Clifford, all these guys, there's only going to be Ganey. There's only going to be 3 of those will start.
Okay.
In the half forward line, you will have Sean O'Shea will be the pivot at 11, but I would imagine Adrian Spillane will come back in at 12, and you're either going to have Stephen O'Brien or Darragh Moynihan at 10. And trust me, those 2 guys have absolutely no problem spending the guts of the game in their own half if needs be. So the one thing you can't accuse Kerry of this year is not having good shape and structure. The one thing I would laud Jack and the lads for is actually putting square pegs in square holes, round pegs in round holes. I think that wasn't happening under the previous management. I think they've now put them back in their best positions. And the one thing that's an advantage, Oisín, to Mayo is that when Mayo are actually getting their blank page out this morning, this evening, and they're setting up their structure, they're setting up their game plan, they will know exactly what they're going to face. Kerry won't pull any card from the bottom of the deck here. The one thing you have to say about them is you could literally almost pick the team. We could actually nearly pick the Kerry team right here, right now. And I'd say, lads, the 4 of us would get 14, if not 15 out of 15. That's the bottom line. It's the only change that there will be in Kerry is in terms of the power, the experience, and whatever else they're bringing off the bench. That is actually going to be very, very strong as well, and shouldn't be underestimated in any debate about this quarterfinal.
Oisín.
in answer to Tony's original question, Kerry absolutely have the ammunition. But even just what you said there, Tony, about bringing in Adrian Spillane, is that a little bit of a bend of the knee to Mayo?
No, because they're not Limerick. They're not Limerick.
Yeah, but they're not going to be as aggressive.
Adrian Spillane has played all season. He's played all season.
He has, yeah.
He has. The only time that
why take him out for the biggest game of the year? Like,
which one?
The Limerick game. The Limerick one.
If you genuinely think Oisín the Limerick was the biggest game of Kerry's year, I'm afraid you have a very bad understanding of what the biggest game of the year is.
Well, the bar is quite low.
Yeah.
The bar is quite low when it comes to like Munster football. Let's not put
now hold on. Now we have to discuss this here. You boys,
we don't have to discuss. We don't.
We do. The last time we were on together, the three of you basically ran a cortege around this podcast proclaiming the death of Munster football. Our esteemed producer Larry Ryan put up a headline which said Munster football is dead. There are 3 Munster teams in the All-Ireland quarterfinals. That's a fact. That says a lot. How many Ulster teams are there? Did you get 2 through in the end?
2, yeah.
Well, like that has to tell a tale.
Anyway, football in Munster must be higher than what it is in Ulster.
Getting back to Kerry genuflecting in front of Mayo and putting a
couple of workers in.
I do think that when you look at the matchups and you like it, I don't want to talk Mayo up too much, guys, because that's not where they're at right now. I'm just thinking that muscle memory and Croke Park and those last 10 minutes of that game on Saturday, and if they can start reproducing that, think a little bit more about, where's Kerry's failings at? Where's the weaknesses at? 2 for me, okay? Aidan O'Shea, for me, is spent force in the middle of the field.
Agreed.
Just can't see the logic in that continuing, but he would be worth a little bit of time at the edge of the square, whether that be to start with or to finish with. And the second thing is, I would be insanely aggressive on Kerry's kickouts, and Mayo can do that. Mayo have form in that regard. So, again, I'm not going to talk Mayo up to the point where we think it's the Mayo of 2017 and 18. It's not. We all know that, but I still think that they're quite a dangerous animal. But look, Kerry,
I do know, by the way, that there is disappointment. There are Dublin footballers wanted Mayo in the quarterfinal, and they wanted them for a whole load of reasons. First of all, the match that would prepare them for a quarterfinal, and because they have a certain thing that they want to settle from last year. So I know there is disappointment there, but I think there is
the semi-final.
Sorry, semi-final. Yes, sorry, but yeah, but there is also a fact that Dublin are now playing Cork, and with the best will in the world, Tony, can you see that as being a competitive match?
Well, I want to say one last thing just before we leave the other thing, and I have to tip my hat to Oisín again. This is becoming a bit of a love-in between the two of us now, which is not going to continue very long. But I do think, and Bryan won't disagree, it's not something that we like to speak about in public, but if you were to talk about the 2 negative talking points that remain in Kerry, it is the goalkeeping situation. Just because they've settled on Shane Ryan doesn't necessarily make everything hunky-dory. And the second thing is the full back line and the full back. Just because the league showed that Jason Foley had found form doesn't mean that that's going to stand up under an avalanche in Croke Park in an All-Ireland quarter-final. I'm just in that place yet where I would love to see the Kerry full back line put under massive pressure, and I'd like to see how they handle it. That's what I would say. Sorry, to go back to your point, Dublin and Cork. I was in Páirc Uí Chaoimh on Sunday. I don't know. I was talking to Colin Cooper, actually. He was on RT duty afterwards, and it's funny, we both actually rounded upon the same word, which is unconvincing. It's great, don't get me wrong. It's good for Cork. It represents progress. They made hard work of beating a very game, but a pretty limited Limerick side who scored 116 on them in their own backyard. And some of the scores were easy. The game was still in the melting pot with 10 minutes to go. Limerick got a black card with 15 to go. Cork scored 1-3 off that 10-minute period. It was crucial. I just think Cork have hit their high water mark for this year. I truly hope I'm wrong in saying that. I remember, funny enough, talking to Ronan McCarthy, and I mentioned it this morning. I spoke to Ronan McCarthy after the 2020 season. It was the year they beat Kerry. And he thought that they missed a monstrous opportunity to progress hugely by the fact that they ended up losing to Tip in the Munster final and missed out on an All-Ireland semi-final in Croke Park against Mayo. In terms of how that would actually bring on the group. So don't get me wrong, the quarter-final against Dublin in a fortnight is going to massively advance this Cork group in terms of knocking off an awful lot of the rough edges. But 19 chances out of 20, it's not going to be enough to actually beat Dublin on the day. It's really not. Dublin are at a pace, the same pace, if not better, that Kerry are at. And Cork, exactly as the script suggested, lived with Kerry for 40 minutes, 45 minutes below Park Urin. And then Kerry ran the bench and just ran away with it. And if Cork do as well, if they're level with Dublin after 45 minutes, I think they've done extremely well. But I don't see them troubling them over 70.
Any trouble, Brian?
No, I agree with Tony 100%, to be honest. I think, look, where Cork are at the moment, they're just not going to ruffle any of the feathers of the four provincial winners, to be honest. I think no matter who they got, be it Derry, Galway, obviously couldn't get Kerry, but even Dublin, I just think they're just not there at the moment. And again, I mean, they can go out like they did against Kerry, and I'm sure that's what they will do. They'll go to try and stop Dublin, and they'll start putting sweepers in place, and they'll try and keep the scoreline competitive. But that's all it's going to do. It's just going to try and keep the scoreline competitive. They're not going to go and outscore Dublin. So, look, I think, as Tony mentioned, it's the best that Cork could have got this season. So I don't think if we looked at where Cork were in the league, struggling to the last game of the season to survive in Division 2, and now all of a sudden find themselves in the last 8 of the All-Ireland. Are they in the top 8 teams in Ireland? Or not? You know what I mean? And that's the reality of it. I think that's just the way the draw worked out. Getting Louth, I said even a couple of weeks ago, I fancied Louth to possibly beat Cork. No offence to Cork. They beat Louth that day. But again, look, it all depends on the look of the draw. And I think in reality, Cork have gone beyond where they should be in the championship. But look, I don't give them, as Tony says, if they're even anywhere in the game by half time against Dublin, I think they're doing very well.
Yeah. Funny enough, I actually, lads, would have given them a shout against Galway, and I possibly would have given them a shout against Derry.
Yeah.
It's probably the one draw, because they couldn't get Kerry.
Yeah.
It's probably the one draw that they really feared was beyond them. You know, I mean, I don't know, Oisín, what you think about Derry. Derry played Cork this year. I know I'm sure they beat them.
Oh, I watched that match on video, and it was men against boys on the day.
Yeah, it was. I just think, though, that like the one thing John Cleary did say yesterday, which I agreed with, is even since the league, like Cork have more about them now. You know, the whole problem with players disappearing, players getting injured, Keith Ricken being unavailable, the handover in management, the whole Park Uring episode with the venue. It's just every time you actually saw a headline about Cork football, it was a negative. That whole thing has quietened down now. You know, they have a set squad. They even have Sean Meehan apparently back in training now. I know the quarterfinal is going to come too soon for him. So you are, in fairness, lads, talking about a slightly different place where they're coming from. So that's why I say, whether it was Derry or Galway, I just think they might have given him something. But there's a thing that Bryan and Oisín know 10 times more about than certainly I do, and that's tempo. And, you know, tempo is so critical to how games are played at. And Dublin, unfortunately, just operate at a different tempo to Cork. And you can retard that for a half an hour, for 40 minutes, for 45 minutes, but eventually, like, the dam bursts, Paul. And, you know, that unfortunately is the reality. So what I think is Cork go into this quarter final, they literally they throw everything they have at it. They see how far it takes them. They get it in the tank and they use it as fuel in 2023.
I take all of that, and
Cork,
and I think John Cleary's done an excellent job. Oisín?
No, I just, you know, as opposed to talking about Cork Dublin, you know, Cork yesterday, you know, played in a game that actually have played in the last two games, but realistically, there were two games that were on an knife edge. They could have lost both of those games, but they didn't. And I think that's a real change as far as Cork are concerned. And I think yesterday we seen a little bit, you know, like the two corner, like O'Donovan and Powder are quality. And if they were able to afford to have them as their two wing backs, I just don't think they get enough from the wing backs. And going back to that Derry game, that's the one thing I picked out. You know, the pace at which they transition and go forward. Like a team like Dublin will just get bodies back in and they'll be able to slow them down. But I have to say, and I have to give huge credit to Cork on what they did against Louth. You know, they dug in and they finished well, and they did something similar yesterday. I mean,
Yeah.
like the chances that Limerick missed in the first half were absolutely criminal. The execution, the decision making, that's something that Limerick are going to learn in time. But I just think even for Cork, even just to take those few yellows, even the red at the end, Cork would have just, you know, they wouldn't have done that, you know, in previous years. So there's a wee bit more about this Cork team, and they are advancing. And I would say for the year they're probably at par or slightly better. And going into this game, nobody will give them a hope, but they have to come out of it with something. And I do think that a little bit like Mayo is that, like, the amount of bodies they had back in the first half yesterday and nobody doing anything. So I would maybe try and play, I know this sounds ridiculous, but a little bit more on the front foot. And if they can get a little bit of pace, even if it means, you know, getting the two wing forwards back into the wing back positions a little bit more often and trying to transition a little bit quicker, that could transform them as a team, because they can do you damage up front, you know.
I agree with that. I think Dublin are going to be interesting to watch as well there. For people who don't know it, I think a really interesting thing to watch is Owen O'Donnell, the Dublin hurling fullback, who's been in the football panel since Dublin were knocked out of the hurling championship. He was a brilliant minor footballer. He's been brought back in, and I know when he comes back and plays for Whitehall, Colmkills, he plays in the forwards, he plays in midfield, he's playing the full back line in training matches, and the reports are that he's doing exceptionally well. Now, it's a huge step to go in to play competitive knockout All-Ireland football, but they're clearly looking at that, and they're under pressure in the back line because both Davy Byrne, who's on the way back, but also Robbie McDade have serious injuries or have had serious injuries, and their back line was creaking already. So it will be interesting to watch that. And I do know, Oisín, when Dublin played Armagh 4 weeks ago, it was apparently a superb match. At halftime, there was only 3 or 4 points between the teams. It ended up both teams emptied the bench after 45 minutes. And the scores were, Dublin were a little bit ahead, but only marginally ahead. And you, as an Armagh person, must see on the opposite side of the draw, Galway first, and then the winners of Derry and Clare. The pathway for 4 teams, Galway, Armagh, Derry and Clare, are entitled to dream this morning of reaching an All-Ireland final.
Yeah, I think there's 4 teams there that would look at that and say, why not? And so why... You know, in Armagh, after the last 2 performances, the 2 teams that we've beaten, I would say that we're in that boat of saying, why not? Why not us? And it's been too long. it's been it's been a tough old journey. Division 2, Division 3, Division 2, Division 3, and eventually sustain yourself in Division 2 into Division 1, and we've sustained ourselves. We've had a bit of continuity as far as our manager's concerned. We've changed out the backroom team. I think you're not allowed in it unless your name's Kieran. But apart from that, I think Kieran Donaghy has had a huge influence on what Armagh have done. And you know what I like? I'm not going to talk my own county up, but I like the fact that going into Croke Park, you have to have a kicking game. It's a different bit. You have to have a kicking game, and you have to be confident in your kicking game. Armagh have kicked the ball all year, even against the most tightest of packed defences. We've been able to kick the ball, and that Croke Park will allow us to do that a little bit more. We have ball winners in the forward line, so Galway and Armagh, I think, is pretty much a 50-50 game. But it's certainly one you'd be looking forward to. And the other thing about Armagh is that they have confidence will be sky high, and it's a long time since you could say that with any conviction about Armagh.
Oisín, I think that has to be epitomised by Rian, and I suppose I hesitate to say this to you about your nephew, but I was a little bit underwhelmed. I was a lot underwhelmed by Rian so far in the championship. I thought he was playing okay, but for a fella of his talent, I thought he was absolutely brilliant yesterday. And it was like that first point he got when he cut in down in front of the stand. There was a nice screen. He came cut down in front of the stand. It was like just the clouds opened, and from that moment, he was just a different class in the game.
Yeah, I think he went into it with a steely determination to turn around what had happened in Ballybofey. I mean, he was kept scoreless. You couldn't talk to him. You couldn't look at him. It felt as if it almost felt as if he was embarrassed with his performance, and he's just well marked. And obviously, he's targeted. And there's two ways you can take that. You can take it as poor me, or you can take it as the biggest compliment ever. And I think when the mindset turns around to listen, I'm getting the best man on the opposition team every day I go out, to take that as a compliment and run with it. And I think he's been able to do that. And let's be honest about it, he's had a nice supporting cast as well. It stepped up around him as well, and I think that certainly helps. And I think when all of the focus is on one individual, it's an opportunity for the guys around you to step up. Give you case in point, Murphy, McBrearty yesterday, McHugh. Like, nobody could fault either of those three guys for effort and endeavour yesterday. But when they were being marked out, the supporting cast disappeared, and that hasn't been the case for Armagh since what happened in Ballybofey. So I think that's another one of those encouraging things.
What has Kieran Donaghy brought to Armagh in your view, Oisín? What did McGeeney see in him, and what has he delivered?
Well, I don't want to oversimplify this, and I don't want to underestimate it, but one of the things a few of the boys said to me is, when I asked that initially, and incidentally didn't ask my nephews because they wouldn't tell you anything, but when I asked that, one thing was enthusiasm. Walked into a change room with a smile on his face, gets a bit of banter going, and I suppose the one thing that Kieran McGeeney would tell you that he's brought is he's challenged them. He's challenged them on how they play, how they set up, what the personnel is. And I think he has worked tremendously on forwards expressing themselves. But also, the thing that I have noticed in particular in the last, probably since the Dublin game in the league, is that no isolation for those forwards, whereas we're getting isolated and getting turned over before. As soon as somebody in that Armagh forward line has the ball, he has one and a lot of the times two options. He can use them or not use them. But the real intent on getting to somebody who's on the ball I think has been tremendous. And even if it's only just running past, the man the ball, dragging the defender out of the way. I mean, nobody spends any time in the D, so you're not clogging up the defense. And I think he's just brought that. And like, there's one opportunity. There's two opportunities in a game, to hit your full forward line and know that it's going to be man for man, and that's off the throw-ins. And that's that Armagh have been trying that all year. That one straight off the throw in, it just never worked to perfection. I think they got 2 points off it during the league. One in the second half against Mayo and one in the first half against Tyrone. And they got 2 points off it, but yesterday it worked perfectly.
I think it's really important what happened from the throw in from that, not just because of the goal, but there's a physical marker there. The ball was thrown in the air. Ben Creeley went straight into Jason McGee and bounced him. While the ball was still in the air, he'd taken that, he bounced Michael Murphy. He gave Oisín, or he gave Rian O'Neill a clean catch by bouncing the two of them. By the time Donegal they had to foul Rian, or Rian was away. So then Rian takes the free, puts it in, and it was a brilliant catch and a brilliant finish. But if you're in the Donegal full back line, I'd say they're just looking at each other. How did you not come through the ball with your fist and make sure it wasn't a clean catch? Like it was so basic in terms of midfield and then a full back line of physical contest that it's kind of remarkable that they allowed that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the other thing was, like, as much as it was a brilliant ball, and Armagh had 3 players there. That's it. That all could have won it. So if they had 3 players there, Donegal had 3 defenders there, and how somebody doesn't get a hand on, or I mean, like,
just bring it to ground. Brian, what does Kieran Donaghy bring to a dressing room?
Well, as Oisín just mentioned there, it is his enthusiasm. Yeah, he does that if he walks into a room regardless. He just has that character about him. He's well able to speak. He can engage with people. He's great crack. He's grateful to have out and about on a night out. You know what I mean? And he'll always entertain. And he's always smiling. Always smiling. Always up for the crack. Always up for the banter. And he does bring that great enthusiasm with him around the place. But I agree 100% with what Oisín says there in relation to what Kieran brings. He does challenge people. And he does kind of think outside the box from the point of view of, I recall talking to Kieran a couple of times about kick-outs, and I think we were going playing Dublin in 15, possibly 16, I think, in the All-Ireland. And one of our big things was going after Dublin's kick-outs, Gluckston, and we were kind of saying, and I think recall in one of the games we did, as we called it, like a gegenpress, where we literally pushed everyone up the field.
Everyone up, yeah.
We brought our cornerbacks up to nearly half backline, and we squeezed the whole pitch. And that was something Kieran was talking. We were talking about that just from the point of view of, doing that as midfielders. Where do we stand? We would always try and take the sideline side. That if there was a runner coming, that you always had to run at him rather than follow him. And all of a sudden, when you cross over, you're 2 or 3 yards off, and he's oceans of space either side. So we'd probably speak about it, midfielders, keep the sideline side, let them cross over, and at least you have the sideline, space to occupy. But he's that kind of stuff. So he talks about it from the point of view of even when you're inside. If you look at the goal against Donegal in the 2014 final, it was a gamble by Kieran. He's inside there, he's raising his hands, he's moving from the side, he's daring the goalkeeper, and he does things like that. And he, I suppose the big thing that I found with Kieran as well is that, and it came from the basketball though, was his hands. He just brings that thing that, he just wins the ball, and he can seem to just, you don't think he sees you, and he sees you. You think that, the pass is gone, or that he might turn one direction, and all of a sudden he's just not looking, and the ball is just, his hands are so quick. And I think even going back to the Mayo All-Ireland semi-final drawing game at Cork Park, David Morrison did the ball to him and he caught it. And it was just how quick he offloaded the ball to James O'Donoghue to get the goal. That's what he brings to it. I definitely think he's brought to the Armagh up the press and the kick out. I definitely think you saw it yesterday of how good Armagh were on the kick out. And I think that's definitely something Kieran's brought, because we worked on it with Kerry. It was something he was vocal about in the dressing room as well with Kerry, and something that he always brought to his game as well. So I think that's one big thing he brings to us. you know, like he thinks outside the box. He's great for enthusiasm around the place. He's great to bring fellas in, talk to fellas, talking to young fellas, giving advice to them. So look,
And his
sometimes like
kicking
that,
really improved, didn't it, in the course of his career? He turned into a really good kicker of the ball.
he did, but he worked on it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
He really had to work on it. I mean, every night before training, Kieran was probably on that side of the field where he's getting the ball, turning onto his right leg and kicking. You know, because look, let's be honest, kicking wasn't his main point of his game. His main at the start of off was a midfielder. Obviously, his hands were so good and he was so good in the air. And then when he went in full forward, he knew he had to bring something else to the game. And you know, in fairness to Kieran, he worked so hard on coming out to the right hand side of the pitch, getting the ball, swinging it with his right, and he's worked off that. But sorry, just going back to what you said, Oisín, about the goal yesterday as well, about how when that ball went in, that there was 3 fellas inside of the square. That's one thing that Kieran always wanted as well, was that he didn't really want to be inside there just 1-on-1, because he knew that, okay, maybe not 1-on-1, but that's probably, he did want to be 1-on-1. But the big thing for him was that when he had the ball, was that there was fellas around him just offload us. The last thing he wanted was to win is come down and be surrounded by 3 or 4 fellas and, you know, the ball taken off him. His big thing was when you get it down, have fellas around you that you can offload us and let them do the damage. He was very unselfish with things like that. You know, he was always thinking about the team rather than himself. So I think, to be honest with you, I can really see where he has helped Armagh from that perspective.
And Armagh, and don't forget, lads, Armagh has helped him too. You know, I mean, like Kieran's on a journey, no more than Tomás O'Shea is on a journey that they hope will eventually, you know, double back and finish back down with Kerry. And like Kieran knew, I remember speaking to him about this because I was very interested in you know, him pursuing a career in media, because, you know, as Bryan will tell you, and as Oisín, as you know, and you've met him, like, I mean, he is a contagious personality. Really, he's just a great guy. You know, he's great. I actually remember, it's an awful thing to say, but he must be one of the few guys I've ever actually been in a funeral procession with, going into a wake, and we're busting our sides laughing, like, with him, you know, because he's just one of those guys. He makes great conversation, and he knew he didn't want to go the media route. He knew he needed to get out there. He needed to learn his trade. And I would imagine Kieran McGeeney and Kieran McKeever have been really good for Kieran Donaghy as well. So it's been a mutually beneficial, you know, relationship. I mean, it's an awkward spot going from Kerry to Armagh. Now, I know
Is he there every night? Is he at training every night? Does he stay up?
Well, he is now. He is now. But I think in the league, Oisín, it was kind of just one night a week, was it?
Yeah, I think he come up one night a week, and he incorporated his work maybe, and he's somewhere to stay up in Armagh as well. So I think that helps, obviously. But it's a phenomenal commitment, and I think obviously he's around a lot more now that we've got to the business end of things. And obviously over the next couple of weeks, it's going to be important. He's there every night.
Doesn't do any harm either that Kieran McGeeney's wife is a neighbour of his from Ballymac. In terms of the school
and the physio now.
And the physio now, I see that Mara's there now. Yeah, sorry, Paul.
So if you look at the draw, and if you look at the games for the weekend, I do want to talk about something else for the weekend, and that was the crowd that was in Cork Park on Saturday, and the crowd that might go to the Tailteann semi-finals next Sunday. And I think the GA has a massive problem here at the moment, and it's tied into the cost of living for people at the moment. It's tied into the cost of GA tickets, and I just want to read out some facts here about the cost of GA tickets. So for the quarterfinal of the Connacht Championship, it was €25 into, say, Galway Mayo. That went to 35 for the Connacht final. It was €40 for the stand in the Munster final. For the Tailteann Cup, it's been €20, and now for the semi-finals next week, it's €25. For the qualifiers, it's €25. For the All-Ireland quarterfinals, it's €40. For the All-Ireland semis, it's 50s, and for the All-Ireland finals, it's €90. Now, the GA is supposed to be a family organisation. It is a family organisation, and people want to go in families. So my family goes to Croke Park to see Offaly in the Tailteann Cup next Sunday. I live close enough to Croke Park that I can walk there, but that's €100 for tickets to go there. I know I've spoken to 2 different families in Offaly who are not going next Sunday because of the price of tickets. because there's a general squeeze there. And I think it's bad enough for families. There is now no family ticket available. They've been gotten rid of. It doesn't seem to me that there are club deals available, though I don't want to say that definitively because I can't find them. Across the island, there are 1.5 million people, more or less, who are either pensioners or they're in education between the ages of 16, full-time education between the ages of 16 and leaving university or college. And so that's 1.5 million. There are the discount for those people falls away at the latter ranges of the championship. But even now, it's very, very limited. It's basically $5 off for those people at this stage of the year. And it's just not enough. It's the squeeze that's on people is totally wrong. And I totally get it. There are pensioners with plenty of money who are capable of paying in. And there are students with plenty of money who are capable of paying in. But there are a whole load who aren't. And it's not just that those prices are too high. It's also that the GAA, far from mitigating the financial pressure on its membership, has actually worsened them this year because it increased the price of a season ticket more or less by 25% on people. So that's the first issue. There's one of cost. But the second issue is one of sales and how you buy them. And I know someone's going to turn around and say, oh, you can buy tickets at Centra shops. Well, anyone who thinks that that's a default position should read Shane Dowling's column on the RTE website from a couple of weeks ago, where he talked about the absolute chaos when the Ticketmaster system crashed and they were trying to buy tickets out of sales for Limerick games. But the GAA sells now all its tickets online. So you either buy it through Ticketmaster in the shop or you buy it through Ticketmaster online. And I do understand the reason why it shifts online on one level, because it makes things easier for volunteers and all of that. But it is an absolute disaster in terms of trying to use that website from people who are trying to do it. I don't know if you boys have any views on this, but to me, the GAA's relation, it signed a 5-year deal with Ticketmaster in December 2020. And it made the announcement, when it made the announcement, at the bottom of the press release, it said that, you know, it invited 8 people to tender for this thing, and Ticketmaster won it. And it said at the end of December 2020, the GAA is now working, and I quote, now working with the Ticketmaster Ireland team to continue to improve the GAA ticketing processes and offerings for our members and supporters. So that's a year and a half ago. There's a fairly basic question here. Is the GAA satisfied now that it has made any improvements, or is it satisfied with the Ticketmaster service? And this idea of, you know, our GAA, where we all belong, like as the slogan goes, is that just a marketing wheeze, or is it something that's actually believed in? I don't know what you boys' views on this are.
Who wants to go first? I'll give you tuppence worth, and let the lads can come in afterwards. This is a space I'm very much in myself, Paul, at the moment, because I have kids now who want to go to a lot of the games. And my most recent experience was the Munster football final. And I remember going on to Ticketmaster and being shocked when I saw it was €40 for a stand ticket for Limerick and Kerry. Now, you have to say, are you going to base tickets on the event, or are you going to base ticket prices on who's playing in the final? You have to base it on the event, to be fair to the provincial councils, because the Munster hurling final is also €40 for a stand ticket, and people will say they got great value for money from that final. And that ultimately, Paul, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but got to look at this from both sides. That ultimately, for me, has to be the benchmark in terms of value for money. I
disagree, Tony. But
let me finish. Okay. If you are buying a ticket to the All-Ireland football final or the hurling final, and it's going to cost you 90 quid, you're right. That is a financial hit to take, and especially if you're lucky enough that you're trying to buy 2 or 3 tickets. But you are talking about the blue ribbon event of the season. You try and buy a ticket for Liverpool and Real Madrid in the Champions League final, or the La Rochelle and Leinster in the Champions League.
Professional sport.
Yeah, I know that. But I mean, you say it's professional sports, but it's the same people who are actually looking to purchase those tickets. I'm as interested in going, if my team were in a Champions League final, as I am in going to an All-Ireland final. You're paying a price and you're paying value for money. I think the GAA is caught here between a pricing structure and the 2 or 3 years that they're coming out of now, where they're in serious arrears financially. And my reason for saying that is I would say that the scope for looking at ticket prices is probably less now than it might have been 3 years ago because of what we've gone through. I genuinely would feel it's okay. This might seem like a contradiction, but I think it's okay to charge €90 for an All-Ireland final. I'm really not in a place where I was comfortable paying 40 quid for Kerry and Limerick. But that raises the question, do you suddenly base your ticket prices so on who's in the final? You can't do that. So yes, you're right, there are issues, there are problems. I'm not even going to go to the Ticketmaster one on this because I don't want to eat into time. But I do think that there is a debate about ticket pricing and the cost of it. But it has to be a realistic debate on both sides. It's too easy, Paul, to say, oh, but we're an amateur organisation, you know, we're a community-based, we've loads of OAPs, kids want to see games, we're trying to promote the games, let's reduce the tickets there to all to a fiver. There's another side to that debate, which is called the financial reality.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll say 3 points back to that. Number one, the GA has come out of the pandemic down, but it also received a huge amount of taxpayers' money to keep it going through that, and I think that should be remembered.
But it required
number
that
two.
money.
Hold on. Number two, it's not the same people who go to the Champions League final as go to see Munster quarterfinals, because I don't know anybody who's brought their family to the Champions League final. I've never met anyone who's done that or brings them to the Champions League game.
No, I compared the Champions League and the All-Ireland final. Not the Munster
so that's but that's different, because people don't bring their families to Champions League finals. They go on their own. It's singular trips and it's a time away or maybe two go. But if you look for people to spend, families to spend at the moment, 100, 150 euros before they even go anywhere, I'd say it's entirely wrong. And I'm not asking that it be reduced to a fiver each, but or anything like that. And it's all right to say the Munster hurling final was value for money at 40 euros each. I don't think any amount of money. You could say that about that game was so brilliant that you'd pay any amount of money almost to see it. But you're still asking people who kind of don't have that kind of money to pay the money to see a game that they really want to see. And to me, that's too much. To me, it's way too much for price.
Was it a sellout?
Oh yeah, but you can get the money. I'm not saying that, but were there how many Mayo people went last weekend? How many people won't go next weekend because they can't afford it? No problem getting tickets.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But it's an individual decision. It's an individual. You are there and you're looking at a Munster hurling final and you're saying, you know what, this is 40 quid well spent for me. You could be looking at next Sunday, you're right, in the Tottenham Cup semi-finals, and you may say, you know what, myself and the two kids, 120 quid, nah, that's not money well spent for me. I'll watch it on TV.
Yeah, it's not quite the point I'm making, though. Of course, it's money well spent if you have it. My point is that there's a lot of people do not have that kind of money at the moment, and there has to be some solidarity. And I particularly make the point around pensioners. The idea that a pensioner should be charged 30 euros, two pensioners charged 30 euros into the Munster hurling final. A pensioner couple going in 60 euros, that's a lot of money out of someone's pension. Bryan or Oisín?
The weekend there was a family ticket available for Clonus, so that was 60 quid for two.
That's
adults.
fair. That's okay. That's okay.
Two adults and two kids, which I thought was okay. But any more than that, I think is would be expensive considering what's on offer. If that like, I mean, it's just a match. It's there's no bells and whistles with it. I mean, when you get to All Ireland final stage, there's 90 quid. I agree with Tony. I think it has to be a premium for an All Ireland final. I think people are more accepting of that. But I think if we want to get more people through the turnstiles, considering the price of fuel, first of all, not even the price of hotels, but the availability of hotels. Like Mayo travelled up on the day, I believe, as a team because they couldn't get anywhere. So that's a huge issue, and I think we keep learning this lesson all the time that footballers want to play in Croke Park and they want that opportunity, but it was a pretty drab affair as far as imagine how good a game Clare and Roscommon would have been in a packed small provincial ground, and 20 quid a piece in. What will be wrong with that? So I do think it's not just the expense of the ticket, but it's the thought of traveling. If you need to stay over, people have got to eat. I was in the Aviva on last Wednesday, and the wee fella went down for a couple of bags of crisps and a couple of bottles of Fanta, and come back up, and he said it was 18 quid. Like, you know what I mean? So things are not really, they're not really that cheap when you head to Dublin. So it's going to be something similar, for people traveling to Croke Park. So yeah, I think
Oisín, the family ticket, just as a matter of interest on Sunday,
Yeah.
was that for a specific area of the ground, or could the 4 just go in anywhere?
No. That was it was the Pat McGrain stand. So the covered stand. So opposite to the covered stand,
Right.
across from the covered stand, and were quite decent tickets.
Okay. 'Cause I think, Paul, that's an initiative that you could work, that you could section off a part of the stand. And I know that, like, Premier League clubs, just to use a bad example, in England, do that all the time, where there are certain areas that are kept for pensioners or for parent and child combinations. That is certainly something.
And I should have said, by the way, in what I was saying, that the €5 for under 16s is really, really fair. That's really fair. And what I'm not talking about is that section. What I'm talking about are the people who are between 16 and 21. That's to me to charge them full price or whatever or very close to full price is way too much. Brian, have you a view on this?
So Paul, just one more thing before Brian comes in. I was at Burnley and Man City this year in the league in Burnley, and I couldn't believe the price.
Sorry to hear that, Oisín.
And I'm slowly but surely recovering from that. But the I couldn't believe the price of the ticket. The price of the ticket was 25 quid and 15 for kids.
Yeah. I saw Man City play Atalanta in the Champions League 3 years ago, just before COVID. £20 into the Etihad.
You always have to go one better than me, don't you?
No, but that's of course I can't get a win ticket. Sorry, that came out wrong. Right.
Look, I agree with everything that's been said here, and Tony is right. There is a debate here for the tickets. And look, I think we have to kind of look at this and say, yes, All-Ireland final, it is the occasion you're paying for. It is the pinnacle of the year, and I think that's €90. It is steep, but look, yes, I think it's what you're paying for. But I do believe, and I recall even when I was younger going to games with my father, it was family tickets, and you had a family section. And I recall even the Munster final, the family section was always the scoreboard in Killarney, where all the families went. And I can recall the amount of games I watched back there. And I think that's important. I think it's important. I even see it myself now. My young fella's coming into the age where he's wanting to start going to games and things like that. And if you're trying to fork out €40 for the Munster final, as Tony said, or €80 for two of us, I thought it's crazy. And especially when you've a young fella who might only watch the game for bits and pieces here and there, and it's just crazy money to be paying for that level. But I definitely do think there's an incentive there for the GEA to get the family ticket back in, from the point of view of have a section in the stadium where you can have your family tickets, have your students, and have your ALPs or OAPs. And I think that's really something they need to look at, because it's not even the point of view of it's. I even found people, and there was a lot of people complaining about even trying to get tickets for the league, and a lot of these people don't have access to it, just generally don't know how to go about on the internet to try and get these tickets. I think that's an issue they need to start looking at, that they can start making it easier for these people to get tickets via the secretary of the club or whoever, that they can get these tickets for them and maybe distribute them through the club system. I just think it's something that needs to be looked at from that point of view. Look, I think what's the big issue at the moment about all this is where we are in the economy is just blown out of inflation. Everything is crazy. We're after coming out of 2 years of COVID, where businesses were backs to the wall. All of a sudden, they're trying to get themselves out of jail, and prices have gone up. We're now dealing in a situation with a war, where we have food supplies a shortage. We've fuel prices gone through the roof. even my own industry, I mean, with regards to construction, where the prices of materials have gone through the roof. So you're coming to a stage at the moment, I think this is where the price, and I think this is why we're now talking about it, is because of the climate we find ourselves in at the moment. And I think now we're feeling the pinch on all this. I think if you went back before COVID, were we talking about ticket prices? Were we talking about, €40 to go into a Munster final? I don't think we would have batted an eyelid at it. But I just think it's where we are at the moment with the economy, that all this is starting to raise its head, and people genuinely just can't afford, even the games at €25, €30, people just genuinely can't afford at the moment because it's just where they are. And I suppose the one down point I have is with the games being in Croke Park, is number one, as a player, all you want to do is go to Croke Park. Like, once you kind of, outside of the Munster Championship, playing in Killarney and Cork were two fantastic occasions, don't want to take away from them. But outside of that, Croke Park is where you wanted to play. You wanted to be in Croke Park. And I don't care what you say, you ask all the teams remaining in the Talent Cup, they'll play in Croke Park in an empty stadium if they had to, because it's Croke Park. And I get as a player, but I totally get then the opposite flip side from the point of view of supporters. You're trying to travel to Croke Park. As we just mentioned, hotels, I think someone had up on Twitter there, I saw it, of trying to go to get a hotel in the vicinity of Croke Park for next weekend, and the price are €300 or €400 for hotels. People can't do that. And it's one thing that if you're, as you say, Paul, look, people traveling from Offaly, it's only up the road. You're up the road and you're home in the evening. People coming from Kerry, people coming from Donegal, coming from Mayo, Galway, that's a fair trek. And I don't think they're going to realistically hop in the car. Well, they might have to hop in the car and drive home. Like, it's 5 hours for me to get from where I'm living down here in Carsavine to get to Dublin. You factor in a stop for a bite to eat, cost of food, fuel. It's just not sustainable for some people. And I just think Oisín made a very good point there. And I go back to even our game against Mayo, the replay in 2014.
In Limerick, yeah.
In Limerick. Like, the drawing game was in Croke Park and was only, I say, there was even 40,000 there. And you can hear the echo around Croke Park with people. You can even hear the players communicating. We can even talk to each other. But when you're inside in that stadium like that, and the atmosphere just gives so much more to the game. And I
went down to that game, Brian. And I think of all the football games outside, the atmosphere that day was absolutely magnificent.
It is, because you still have 40,000.
You still have 40,000 and it was packed. And it really is make a difference. But I think the GA is a little bit impaled there, and I do feel a certain sympathy on this one for two reasons. There are players who from different counties who, if they do get out of their province or they do get through the qualifiers, they want the experience of playing in Croke Park. So I do get that, number one.
Yes.
And number two, I'd say the GAA, through its corporate boxes and through its premium ticket holders, have obligations to hold a certain amount of matches in Croke Park.
Yeah.
Right.
And I understand that too. So those things are probably come back on that.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. But look, as I said, and don't get me wrong, it's the incentive for the players, and even the whole thing with the Talent Cup about getting this competition up and going, give it the incentive for teams to go at it. It's important that they get to Croke Park, and it's important that they play their semi-final and final in Croke Park, because if you're offloading them to Portlaoise or to Thurles, the appeal is gone, because players want to play in Croke Park, and that's the big thing for me. But look, it is a debate, but again, do you know what I mean? It's, as you say, the likes of Kerry and Dublin and these teams who are so used to playing in Croke Park, if you were to say, we'll go to Thurles, we'll go to Portlaoise, and we'll have a full house, I think they'll say, yeah. But as you say, if you look at likes of Clare, they wanted to go to Croke Park last weekend. They wanted to go and play. Roscommon probably wanted to go to Croke Park. They wanted to find their feet in Croke Park and see what it's like. Armagh will be itching to go to Croke Park again, because they want to find what Croke Park is like. They want to see their kicking game in Croke Park is going to suit them down to the ground. They want to find their feet. So, look, you can't please everyone. It's a hard one to call, but just going back to ticket prices, I think the big thing at the moment is, if we were back 2 or 3 years ago prior to COVID, I don't think we would be complaining too much about it. I just think it's the fact of where the economy is, the price of hotels, coming out of COVID, inside the middle of a war. I just think now people are finding the pinch on where we are with money to go to these games.
I want to say one last word on this, and we'll move on then. The website through which the tickets are sold is really, really poor. It repeatedly crashes. It's not intuitive. It's not designed to work across mobile, in my view, across mobile, iPad and laptop perfectly. And if you're going to shift to an all ticket system, you have to do it better than what they've put in place. So just leave it at that. Next week, we need to come back and talk about what this season means for different teams who have now exited the championship. And I mean in this Donegal at the crossroads. I want to look at where Kildare are at and whether Kildare can, whether this is a staging post and where they're doing. We also want to preview next week the All-Ireland quarterfinals, and in particular look at what Clare have done and have a really good hard look at the achievement that Clare back to an All-Ireland quarterfinal in the circumstances. And we will review the Tailteann game semi-finals, which are on this weekend, where Offaly play Westmeath and Cavan play Sligo. So thank you to Larry Ryan for running this podcast, to Raf Rocca, to Jack Neville, to Tony Leen for making it happen, and to everyone at Examiner Sport. Thank you to Renault for their support. Huge thanks to Oisín McConville, and especially as well to Brian and to Tony for joining us today. Bémi Turnash Galua.
Thanks to our sponsors Renault, the Renault Capture, the versatile compact family SUV.
You're still the one I run to, the one that I belong to. You're still the one I want for
A grain of rice, a grain of rice is going to tip the scale. Just remember that, lad.
There's a small bit of a needle there.
Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen back to